We're going to be looking at the story of Joseph. And the title of my sermon, can we say it once together? How to Handle Greatness. All right, that you don't sound convinced. So let's try it one last time. How to handle greatness. All right, one last time. How to handle greatness. There we go. All right, look, here's what I'm going to do. Because the story of Joseph is a little bit long, it's 13 chapters long. I'm not going to read all 13 chapters for you. I'm going to read some of it, but what I want to do is just using images and a quick highlight of what was happening, give you a quick recount of what the story of Joseph is about. So that might take about 3 to 5 minutes based on how fast we read, and then we'll jump into the passage for today. But let me start with telling you the story of Joseph. Long ago, God made a covenant with Abraham. Abraham had a son after many years named Isaac, and Isaac had a son named Jacob. And Jacob had 12 sons, but he loved his youngest son, Joseph, the most. He gave Joseph a coat of many colors as a sign of his love to him. And Joseph's brothers, the 11 other brothers, saw this, and they hated him for it. One night, Joseph had a dream, and in the dream he saw that he would rule over his brothers one day. When he told his brothers about his dream, surprise, surprise, they hated him for it, and they wanted to kill him. In anger, they threw him into a pit and decided to sell him for silver as a slave into Egypt. And so Joseph was taken far away from home into Egypt, and there he served as a slave. Now in Egypt, Joseph was bought by Potiphar, who was the captain of Pharaoh's guard. And there he served excellently and faithfully in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife noticed that Joseph was an attractive man, and so she tried to seduce him. But Joseph wouldn't betray his master for all the goodness that he showed him. And so furious at being rejected, Potiphar's wife then accused him of trying to rape her. And now Joseph finds himself thrown into prison for a crime that he did not commit. In prison, Joseph then meets two of Pharaoh's servants that were also there in prison. And both men had strange dreams one night that they couldn't understand the meaning of. Now Joseph interpreted both of their dreams, and it came true just as he interpreted it to be. Now many years passed, and then one night, Pharaoh, who was the king of Egypt, also had a dream. And none of the wise men in all of Egypt were able to interpret the dream that Pharaoh had. And suddenly his servant remembered about Joseph, and he told Pharaoh about how Joseph interpreted his dream for him. And so Joseph was brought out of prison and made to stand before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh told him his dream, and Joseph interpreted it for him. In Pharaoh's dream, Joseph told him that there was going to be a famine coming, and there'll be 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. And Joseph told Pharaoh that he must prepare Egypt for this famine that's going to come. If you read on, Pharaoh was so impressed by Joseph and his wisdom that he decided to put him second in command over all of Egypt and all of his kingdom. And Joseph began to store grain to prepare Egypt for the famine that was about to come. And then finally, 7 years later, the famine did come, and all the world went into starvation. There was lack, and people from all the nations began to come to Egypt to buy grain because they were one of the few countries that was prepared for this famine. Now, among the people that came to Egypt to buy grain was Joseph's brothers, the same ones that sold him into slavery. And they didn't know that he was now the ruler of Egypt. And in fact, they didn't even recognize him. But Joseph recognized them immediately. Awkward moment. And Joseph remembered all that his brothers had done to him, And so he tested them to see if they had really changed. And when Joseph saw that they were truly sorry, he revealed himself to them, and his brothers, as you can imagine, were terrified. But Joseph forgave them, and with tears in his eyes, he told them, "What you had meant for evil, God had meant for good." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob and his whole family to live in Egypt, and he kept them safe, and he cared for them through the famine that lasted 7 years. And he looked after his father and his brothers until the day he died. That is the story of Joseph. Doesn't it feel like Sunday school all over again? That's all AI, by the way. Look, I want to break, and in case you're wondering, the story of Joseph is between Genesis chapter 37 all the way to Genesis 50. It's 13 chapters, and just because of the sake of time, and I'm not going to be able to read 13 chapters for you, we decided to show it through a little AI-generated story. But I do want to look at the Bible and some parts of it. So I want to start with part 1, which is Joseph had a dream. And in Genesis chapter 37, this is what it says. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. In short words, all of Joseph and his brothers were all having to do work. And every time they would go out to work together, Joseph would come back and complain about his brothers. That was the relationship that they had. Can you imagine being the youngest of 12 siblings? That was Joseph. And in verse 3, it says, "Now Israel loved Joseph," or in other words, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. This is not good parenting advice. If you have kids, love them all equally. But because he was his son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his other brothers, they hated him, and they could not speak peacefully to Joseph. And we read on in verse 5. It says, "Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. And he said to them, 'Hear the dream that I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in a field, and behold, my sheaf rose and stood upright, and all of your sheaves gathered around and bowed to my sheaf.'" It was not a very deep and it was not a very complex dream. Basically, he told them, "Look, I see 12 sheaves of wheat, and all of the others are bowing to me. I desire to be the greatest." And so his brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us?" And so they hated him both for the way he acted towards them, and then also for the dream that he had. Let me start off by saying, many times God gives us a dream. Don't raise your hands, but how many of you feel like you have a dream for something you want to do with your life? You have a desire for greatness. You have a desire for your life having to be in a certain way. I do this on my birthdays, where I kind of feel happy on my birthdays, but I also feel sad because I constantly live in this pressure that I'm not far enough for how old I am. And so I'm always, racing to get further and further and further ahead in life. And that was kind of like Joseph. He was 17 years old, and he was already dreaming of ruling his family and ruling the world. And that's kind of what he was like, and maybe some of us in this room are like that. And one of the things we have to realize that while the dream was real, the dreamer was not actually ready to receive it. He had a great dream. He had a desire that was actually a God-given desire. But something in his life had to adjust. Something in his character had to be shaped. Something about him was not fully ready And so God decided to make him wait. God decided to prepare him so that one day when his dream actually comes true, he will not be ruined by it. And so this is how God decided to prepare him and take him on a journey. Number one, he was betrayed by his brothers. Then he was enslaved into Egypt. Then he was accused by the wife of his master for a crime that he did not commit. Then he was thrown into prison for that crime, even though he never did it. Then in that prison, he there interpreted the dreams of Pharaoh's other servants, and they forgot about him. And finally, after that long and painful journey, it wasn't 2 weeks, it wasn't 3 weeks, it was probably somewhere in the range of 10 to 13 years. Quite a long time. Like have you ever gone through a rough patch in life? How long did it last you? Can you imagine a 10-year rough patch? That was Joseph. So Joseph at 17 years old dreamed that he would be a great ruler, and then he goes through 13 years of difficulty after difficulty after difficulty and hardship and one more hardship, and he just couldn't seem to catch a break. But one of the things that the story keeps telling us is that all through that time, God was with Joseph. Have you ever gone through a tough season of your life? Maybe you lost a job, you lost a loved one, a close friend betrayed you, a relationship you were hoping would work out fell apart, a close family member is really sick. Do we stop to realize that God was with us in those moments? Some of you are going through tough times right now. You might not feel His presence, but can I tell you that He's there? All through Joseph's life, both downhill and when he turned around and was uphill again, God was with him. And so wherever we are in life, wherever you are right now, I hope that we live with the realization and the perspective that God is with us. But let's keep reading on. So we see in part 1 that Joseph had a dream, but God had a purpose for Joseph in that dream. When we read the passage, we clearly saw that Joseph had a desire to be great. And that's not a bad thing. But he didn't have any purpose for his greatness. He didn't have any, have you really wanted to be rich? But once you get rich, you don't actually know what to do with your money? Many times we desire greatness. We desire power, we desire wealth, we desire certain things, but we don't actually know what we'll do with it once we have it. It's a terrible analogy, but you see those dogs chasing a car? So when I would drive on the road late at night, there'll be dogs barking and running after my car. And one time I stopped at a signal, and the dog reached my car, and he didn't know what to do. Because they're so used to the car running, going faster than them that they're never able to catch up. And now finally he caught up to my car, and he just kind of stood there like, oh, now what? The game was kind of finished. But look, Joseph had a dream, but God had a purpose for it. So let's read now in Genesis 45. So 7 chapters after the first one. And it says this: so Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near me, please." So just a quick recap. Joseph went to prison, he came out of prison, he interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and now he's ruler, second in charge over Egypt. And his brothers come to him and basically ask him for grain. We're starving, can you please give us some grain so that we and our families can survive and live? And so Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near me, please." And they came near, and he said to them, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves." Notice how much he changed. He's telling them, don't be angry with yourselves. Like he had already gotten over his anger towards them. And so now he's kind of comforting them as well, saying, don't be angry with yourselves for what you did. For God sent me here to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for 2 years, and there are 5 years left. And there will neither be plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. Think of it like this. His brothers wanted to kill him. Yeah? They wanted to kill him. They threw him into a pit. Then one of them felt bad, saying, he is our brother. Let's not kill him. So instead, let's sell him as a slave. Not much better, but a little bit better. And his response to them at the end of this journey that he went through, of hardship after hardship after hardship, is that you wanted to kill me, but I'm here to save your life. God sent me in advance, ahead of you, to save you. And despite all the suffering that I went through, my purpose in life is to protect you and make sure that you survive and are well taken care of. And then we see finally in Genesis 50 that his brothers came and fell down before him and said, we are your servants. We don't deserve this level of kindness that you are showing us. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, and this is kind of the climax of the story, and it kind of summarizes everything about the life of Joseph. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. Many would have died in the famine, but thanks to Joseph, now many are kept alive, as they are today. And so do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. And thus he comforted them, and he spoke kindly to them. Did they deserve it? No. Did he have every right to pay them back for the wrong that they had done to him? Yes. Was he in the right and they were in the wrong? Yes. Could he have held it over them and refused to forgive them? Yes. If he wanted to, could he have ended their lives? Yes. But instead, not only does he forgive them, he then provides for them and their kids, and he spoke kindly to them, and he encouraged them not to hold on to this betrayal and hate. Look, I want us to think about this for a moment, and this is a thought I want to share with you. While we go through situations where we face pain, I remember when I just got married, and I came back from my honeymoon, and my entire business collapsed. I was running a really successful business, and it had a decline by 90%, 90, not 19. And so I started my married life. Literally, this was week 2 of being married, with a 90% salary cut, living in a student hostel at St. John's, because that was probably the safest thing we could afford. And I asked God, why am I going through this? Have I not been generous? Have I not been faithful to you? Why is this happening to me? And while we realize, maybe we don't, that it's not really God who causes us pain, it's not really His desire that we go through suffering. Sometimes just because of the way life is, we go through moments where it's hard and we suffer. It might be financial, it might be health, it might be in a relationship, it might be just internally, where we go through depression and anxiety that we just cannot seem to get out of. And one of the things we have to realize, and it might not help you now when you're in it, but you will reach a phase where that season is over and you get to look back on difficult seasons of your life and realize that God used it for good. Meaning He didn't desire that that would happen. He didn't make it happen. But even though bad things happened to you, He could turn it around and make it good. Even though terrible things happened in your life, God has this magical way of bringing it all together, taking those broken pieces and restoring it to something even more great and even more beautiful. And so I sat unemployed for 7 months, wondering where my life was going and why am I here, kind of with no purpose in life. And it was around that time that God actually put it in my heart to start this church. And it was also around that time where God introduced me to the company that I'm now working in. And one thing led to another, and it was kind of a dream job. But it came through suffering, it came through rejection, it came through failure, it came through moments where I truly questioned God, if you are good, then why is this happening? And yet one of the things I saw is that God was working inside of me. Maybe you're going through moments where you don't like what's happening to you, but God is working inside of you. It doesn't feel good, but it's good. Everything around you looks bad, feels bad, you have a lot to complain about, but if you hang in there, maybe it'll all work out. So let's think about Joseph. What we realize is that the different seasons that he went through impacted and shaped his life in positive ways. He was thrown into a pit and then he was made a slave from that pit. Not a pleasant experience. None of you have been slaves, neither have I, but we can safely assume that it was not fun. It was not a dream job. And yet something about that taught him as a slave what it meant to serve other people, what it meant to be humble. And it is sad, but he was brought to the very lowest place in society. Slaves have no rights. They don't even get paid for the work that they do. The only thing they get is to be kept alive, so they get enough food to survive so that they can keep working. And yet in those moments, he learned what it meant to be humble. Can we learn humility before life teaches us humility? I mean, and for some of us, maybe we'll have to go through experiences so that we learn to be humble. But the invitation that God always gives us is that if you desire to be great, if you desire to be successful, you have to have humility so that it doesn't get to your head. And so the pit made him humble and the prison made him patient. There he waited behind bars for a crime that he didn't commit. Year after year after year. It was probably 7 years. So it's not like, falsely accused. 2 weeks later we realized, whoops, sorry about that. You're free to go. No, 7 years in prison. And it taught him what it meant to wait. How many of you like waiting? How many of you are waiting right now? Waiting for that job to work out, for that opportunity to open, for that breakthrough to come, and it's not fully come, and I can't control my life, so all I can do right now is wait. And yet we see is that though he learnt humility the hard way, and he learned patience the hard way, finally then when he was promoted to the palace, he had qualities that helped him to survive over there. He had something about his character so deeply shaped that when he was in the palace and he had all of this greatness, he was actually able to manage it well. It was commonly said once that if you really want to know what a person is like, put them through a tough time and then put them through a really good time. And both will show what they're truly like. When something bad happens to them, all they will do is complain about how they're and show their entitlement. And then you flip it and you give them an abundance of what they desire for. And then they'll show you their pride. And show you oh, I deserve this. I am better than everybody else. Oh, of course I'm richer than you. You're poor and I'm and all of their attitude will come out. And that's why Paul says, I've learned how to live in lack and I've learned how to live in abundance. But I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's not the lack, it's not the abundance here. It's ability to live focused on God. How many of you have gone through some pain? If you cannot handle it, you're probably not cut out for the purpose that God has for you. And I'm not saying it in a way to condemn you, but I am saying it in a way to help you shape your perspective around the situations of life that you're anyways going to go through. That person who doesn't like you, no matter what happens, they will still not like you. That relationship that fell apart, text them back however many times you want, it still will fall apart. And I'm not a prophet when I say that, but sometimes we go through tough times. And while it's not God's will that we go through tough times, He will shape you for the better if you let Him. Meaning you have a choice. You have a choice, but in the midst of that pain, if you say, God, I don't understand, but help me hold on to you through this tough season, something about that will shape your life. But let me say this, if you have power, but you have no purpose, it will get to your head and it will ruin you. Just for fun, I'm friends with a lot of people that are still in college, and I have the joy of seeing them in their final semester of college. And all of them are sitting for placements, and I usually ask them, man, you're getting job interviews, and you're sitting for placements, and you're sending your CV. How much of a salary do you want? And usually everyone says this ridiculously high number, like I want 20 lakhs leaving college, and I'm going to be a millionaire, and I'm going to buy myself a car with my first salary, and I'm going to have everything that I ever wanted. And then I ask them, well, what kind of person are you going to be? Oh man, I never thought about that. The only thing I thought about were all the things in my Amazon cart that I couldn't buy yet. And now once I get my salary, I will finally be able to buy it. But what kind of person I will be? Who has time to think about that? But can I just tell you with all honesty, I've experienced this. When you have a lot of anything, meaning it could be a lot of money, it could be a lot of influence, it could be a lot of power, it could be a lot of followers on Instagram. When you have a lot of anything, but you don't have any purpose for it, it will slowly begin to change who you are. I've had too many people say, oh, money will not change me. It did. I've had friends that are working in governments and now hold positions of power, and they say, oh, I won't let the power get to my head. They did. For some of us, we are dreaming for that relationship, or we're dreaming for that job, and the moment we get it, we then let it get to our head. And it's not that we intend to, it's just that we didn't find purpose when we were chasing after the goal. And so all of our identity was tied to that achievement, but we did not develop any purpose around it. And so then once we reached the achievement, we were still the same person on the inside. And one of the things we see about the life of Joseph, that when he finally became a ruler, he then realized, maybe God sent me ahead so that I could save everybody else's life. My greatness is not about me. It's about how I can serve the people around me well and take care of them. So 4 quick lessons that we learn and we see from the life of Joseph. And if we learn this ourselves, You can learn this the hard way or you can learn this the easy way, but if we learn this, then we will know how to handle greatness. Number one is Joseph had to learn how to forgive. His brothers threw him into a pit, and then 13 years later they come begging him and saying, "Can you keep us alive? We are in a pit." And he had to find it in his heart to forgive them for what they did to him and help them out of the pit that they were in. Do we have people that we hold grudges against? Are we holding bitterness towards people? And you might think that you were right and they were wrong. Well, it's true for Joseph too. He was right, they were wrong. And still, we have to learn how to forgive. They do not deserve it. But when we look at how God forgives us, guess what? We don't deserve it either. Number two, Joseph had to learn how to give. His brothers sold him for about 20 shekels of silver. And then his response to them was, not only will I provide for you, I will provide for your children and I will provide for your whole families, not just for this famine, but till the day you die. I will take care of you out of my wealth. Out of my hard work, out of my salary, I will now provide for you. I don't know if they were always grateful. Many times we will give to people if they're grateful and indebted towards us. Can I tell you, the more you practice generosity, the more you'll realize that people are not very grateful. And that is the test. Will you be generous only to the point where people appreciate and praise you for it? And if your ability to be generous is only to the point where everyone is able to show and tell you how grateful they are for your life, you will not be a very generous person. Many times God is generous towards us and we don't actually recognize it. And yet He is. Number three, Joseph had to learn how to serve. He spent years interpreting everyone else's dream. And nobody was there to fulfill his. He had to interpret the dreams of the servants in prison. There were two of them. He had to interpret Pharaoh's dream. He had to deal with being rejected, being imprisoned, being falsely accused, being forgotten, not being recognized for really how servant-hearted he was. And he just kept serving anyways. And then finally his dream came through. It was only through interpreting Pharaoh's dream did he see his dream fulfilled. How do I say this to you? How do I say it to myself? Look, you will only be great if you learn how to serve others. If you have a desire for position, but you have no desire to serve anyone else, you have a fairy tale dream. It will never come to pass. And I'm not saying this because I hate you and because I'm trying to push you down. But the Bible clearly says, God resists the proud and He gives grace to the humble. Meaning, if you feel like your life is being resisted, it might not be the devil. Let me say that again. If you feel like your life is like there's a wall in front of you and you just cannot move past it, it might not be the devil. And you can pray as much as you want. It might end up actually being God that's resisting you because we have not dealt with the pride in our heart and this work is below me. Apart from preaching, do you know what my job is in church? I am the garbage man. After you finish eating, my job is to take that garbage and throw it out so that we don't have rats here tomorrow. If any work is below you, you are not cut out for greatness. If you are too good to sweep the floors and to do the dishes, and do you know who I am? Do you know how many degrees I have and what my position is? Nobody cares. If you do not know how to serve others, I think you get the point. Finally, the last thing is Joseph learned how to be kind. While his brothers couldn't speak peacefully to him, look at this. Genesis chapter 37, when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him and they could not speak peacefully to him. And then in response, this is how Joseph speaks to them when he's in a position of power. When he has all the ability to hold the fate of their lives in his hand. He tells them, do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. And thus he comforted them and he spoke kindly to them. So this was really the journey of Joseph's life. He dreamed of ruling, and instead he was made a slave. And then as a slave, he had to serve Potiphar, only to be falsely accused. And then he had to serve his fellow prisoners, only to be forgotten by them for all the good things that he did. And then finally, he had to serve Pharaoh, finally to be rewarded and given that position of rulership. And now that he was finally the ruler, he showed what a great ruler he was by serving the people who did not deserve it. Now God said, now you are ready to rule. Now you are ready to have something great come out of your life. And that's why Jesus also says in Matthew chapter 20, it says the rulers out in the world, or the rulers of the Gentile, lord it over people and exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so with you. Whoever wants to be the greatest must be what? A servant. Just like Joseph. Whoever wants to be the greatest must learn how to be a servant. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And then it goes on and it says an interesting line, and to give his life. Another way to translate it is so that many can be kept alive. Does that sound a little bit like Joseph? So Joseph dreamed of being great, and God had to teach him the true meaning of what it meant to be great by being a servant. So look, as we end and as I close, one of the things we have to realize is that this is not really the story of Joseph. This is actually our story. And one of the things we have to see is that Jesus is really the greater Joseph. Think about Jesus. He was betrayed by his brothers. Judas betrayed him, one of his closest disciples. He was then sold by Judas for silver and made as a slave. He was falsely accused of crimes he did not commit. He was thrown into a pit. And then finally he rose to rule again. But not as somebody that's trying to lord it over you, but as God to show us that he loves us. And so through his sacrifice, many lives can be saved. Our lives. Jesus is the greater Joseph. This story is not just about Joseph. One of the things I love about Genesis is that you see, if you read Genesis, it's kind of like a summary of the entire Bible. Where Genesis starts off with God creating the world. And then by Genesis 3, people sin and walk away from God. And then the last 13 chapters of Genesis tell the story about how God sent Joseph to redeem and save all of his brothers. It's kind of like the gospel. We walked away from God, and God sent not Joseph, but Jesus to die for, forgive, provide for, take care of, speak kindly to, and save his brothers. And so it takes humility to realize if Jesus is Joseph in the story, that means we are the brothers. We are the ones that are messed up. You know, one of the privileges I have as a pastor is sharing the gospel with a lot of people. And one of the hardest things for people to accept that prevent them from truly receiving Jesus is the realization that they are not always a good person. It's a really hard thing to accept, because when we read stories, we read the story of David and Goliath and we want to be David. We read the story of Daniel in the lion's den and obviously we are Daniel. We read the story of Joseph and we are immediately going on in our head, yeah, that person betrayed me and that person hurt me, and we think we are Joseph. But the reality is that we were the evil brothers. And the hardest thing sometimes that prevents us from experiencing God's love is the denial of our sin. Where everybody else is the problem, everybody else is the bad ones, and I'm just trying to do the right thing. And it's only when we come to that place where we realize, gosh, I'm not the good guy in the story, I'm actually the bad one. And my brother came to save me. That's when God opens up our heart and shows us His love. So here's how I want to close. Many of us feel like our life is called to greatness. We have great dreams, great things that we want to do. But will you learn, just like Joseph, how to handle what God is about to give you? Because there might be a day where all the greatness comes to you and it could ruin you. It could destroy you. Or you will learn how to use that greatness to serve and care and forgive and provide and be kind to those around you. Being kind is a really big thing. Most girls in church that I talk to and say, what do you look for in a guy? Always, they will say, I'm really looking for someone who is kind. I pray that we'll learn how to be. So here's how I want to pray for you as we close. As Jesus has done for us, can we recognize that we are not as good as we think we are? And yet, our big brother Jesus has been good to us. And I hope that now gives us the strength to forgive the people in our lives who don't deserve it. To not hold it over people when we are in the right, but learn what it means to truly serve them. To give and not keep score. Too many of you are in relationships and you're keeping score. If you do this, then I will do this. And if you don't do this, then I won't do this. Stop it. Learn how to give with an open hand and not keep count. And finally, learn how to be kind to people when they don't deserve our kindness. Can we stand? Let's pray. God, I pray, help us. Help us tonight to be more like you. God, help us to have a realistic picture of ourselves. God, that we would be willing to admit the times where we are not all that good. God, that we would be open about our sin and our struggle. God, we would be willing to come to you and be honest about the fact that we have messed up. And Jesus, I thank you that you are our older brother that has saved our lives. God, you have been gracious to us. You have been merciful to us, though we don't deserve it. And so I pray, God, tonight, would you give us the strength to forgive the people in our lives? God, right now, if we are holding on to bitterness of what others have done to us, God, give us the strength to forgive them. God, give us the strength to serve and forgive and be generous and kind to the people around us in the same way that you have been gracious and kind and generous towards us. We thank you, God, that though we don't deserve your grace, you still give it to us every day. And so I pray as we receive your love and your grace, we will extend your love and your grace to others. In Jesus' name, amen.